John Michael Osbourne eased the battered black van into the far corner of the Ozzy's Bite parking lot, the one tucked behind the dumpster where the security camera lens had cracked years ago and never been replaced, and killed the engine with a twist of the key that still felt foreign in his fingers after decades of tour bus ignitions and private jet throttles. The diner's sign glowed above the roofline, a stylized bite mark carved through the O in Ozzy's, the neon tubes humming the same low E that had vibrated through his chest since the first time he stepped on stage with a band called Earth. He tugged the brim of a plain gray baseball cap lower slipped on a pair of scratched aviators that had once belonged to a roadie who swore they'd survived the Diary of a Madman tour, and pulled the hood of an ancient Black Sabbath sweatshirt faded to the color of dishwater over everything else. No rings, no bracelets, no silver skull pendants, only the plain wedding band he never removed, and the small scar on his left thumb from the night he bit the head off a dove in a record label meeting. The lot smelled of hot asphalt and fryer grease, the Louisiana-style spice blend he'd insisted on drifting through the cracked window as he sat for a moment, listening to the muffled thump of Crazy Train leaking from the outdoor speakers someone had mounted too close to the drive-through menu. Inside those walls was a chain he'd launched on a whim after a tax attorney suggested restaurants were a safer bet than another reunion tour, a chain that now stretched from Los Angeles to Nashville to this scrubby patch of desert 20 miles outside Vegas, where the cacti looked like they'd been planted by a roadie who'd misplaced the backstage passes. He'd eaten in the flagship location exactly twice once, at the ribbon cutting, when the mayor handed him an oversized pair of golden scissors once more, when a reality TV crew followed him around for a pilot that never aired. And after that, he'd signed the checks, approved the playlists, and let the machine run itself, while he disappeared into studios, mansions, and the occasional rehab that still carried his name on the dedication plaque. Tonight, the machine felt like it was running on fumes, and the online reviews had started to bite harder than any bat ever had. Cold fries, surly cashiers, a vibe that felt more like a gas station burrito than the rock and roll sanctuary he'd promised. So here he was, John Michael Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness, in a hoodie that smelled faintly of mothballs, stepping out of a van that still had a dent from the night Tony Iommi backed into it during the 1983 U.S. Festival, crunching across the gravel toward the side entrance where employees slipped out to smoke. The door handle was sticky with soda residue. He wiped it on his jeans and pushed inside. The blast of air conditioning hit him first. Then the smell-charred beef cayenne, the sweet tang of cola syrup, and finally, the music turned down just enough that conversation could happen, but loud enough that every riff felt like a pulse. The floor tiles were black and white checkerboard, scuffed in the exact pattern he remembered from the architectural renderings, and the walls were plastered with framed platinum albums, concert posters, and a life-size cardboard cutout of himself from the Blizzard of Oz era that someone had drawn devil horns on with a Sharpie. A family of 4 sat beneath the cutout, the kids arguing over who got the last onion ring, while the parents scrolled phones. A lone trucker in a faded Metallica shirt nursed coffee at the counter. 2 teenagers in the corner booth filmed a TikTok mouthing lyrics to No More Tears, while a server refilled their sodas without being asked. John joined the line at the register's third from the front, hands shoved deep in his hoodie pocket, studying the menu board, the way he used to study set lists. Black Sabbath, burger, double patty, blackening spice, pepper jack, bark at the moon, fries, Cajun dust, garlic, aioli, Diary of a Madman, milkshake, chocolate, cayenne, sea salt, rim. The couple ahead of him ordered, quickly paid, moved aside. Then it was his turn. The cashier on the left wore a name tag that read Lena, her ponytail swinging as she tapped the screen without looking up. Next, she said, voice flat as a detuned guitar string. John cleared his throat, pitched it lower than his natural register. The Brummy accent softened to something generic. Black Sabbath burger medium with bark at the moon fries and a cola, please. Lena's fingers flew across the register, the total popping up in red digits. $14.75. He slid a crumpled 20 across the counter, careful not to let the scar on his thumb catch the light. She made change, handed him a receipt, and turned to the next customer before the coins hit his palm. The second cashier, Jake, leaned against the partition separating the registers from the drink station phone, in one hand, the other drumming a silent paradiddle on the countertop. John stepped aside to wait for his order number to be called, positioning himself near the napkin dispenser where he could hear without being noticed. Jake pocketed the phone and nudged Lena with his elbow. Another walk-in, he muttered, jerking his chin toward the trucker who'd just left a 5 on the counter. Bet he stiffs the tip jar again. Lena snorted, popping her gum loud enough to cut through the guitar solo overhead. Ever since they started that second solo program, it's been a zoo. Half these new hires can't tell a spatula from a cymbal stand. Jake laughed, the sound sharp and joyless. Owner probably doesn't even know we exist. Guy's too busy counting royalties in his mansion to notice the fries are soggy. Lena rolled her eyes. Ozzy Osbourne, yeah, right. Bet he's never set foot in here since the photo op. Place is just a tax write-off, with his face on the cups. John felt the words land like a cymbal crash to the temple, the receipt crumpling in his fist. Second solo was his idea, modeled after the program that had given his old sound tech a job after prison, a pipeline for cooks, servers, dishwashers who needed a stage to prove they could still play. He'd funded it himself quietly through a foundation that didn't carry his name. And now it was a punchline. The order screen flashed 42. A runner slid a tray across the pickup counter, burger wrapped in foil printed with tiny Bat's fries in a red basket, cola sweating in a branded cup. John stared at it for a long second, the smell of cayenne and beef rising like a memory of arena smoke machines, then turned on his heel and walked out without the tray. The bell above the door jangled behind him, a sour note in the night air. Outside, the desert wind carried the faint smell of creosote and diesel. John leaned against the van, cap tilted back, now aviators reflecting the neon bite mark as it flickered between magenta and violet. He could still hear the music through the walls, the opening riff of Iron Man starting up like a dare. Inside his pocket, his phone buzzed, probably Sharon checking if he'd landed in Vegas yet, but he ignored it. Instead, he opened the Notes app and typed with his thumbs, Lena and Jake registers mocking second solo owner absentee soggy fries, fix or fire. He stared at the words until they blurred, then deleted them and started over. Observe. Document. Return. The lot was emptying, the family of 4 piling into a minivan, the TikTok teens posing for one last selfie beneath the sign. A dishwasher emerged from the side door, lighting a cigarette, exhaling smoke that curled like a guitar solo into the night. John watched him for a moment, then pushed off the van and walked the perimeter of the building, boots crunching on gravel, staying in the shadows cast by the floodlights. At the back corner, he found the employee entrance propped open with a milk crate, the kitchen's heartbeat spilling out, clatter of pans, hiss of the grill, someone shouting, behind in a rhythm that felt like a drum fill. He edged closer, close enough to see the stainless steel prep tables gleaming under fluorescent tubes, close enough to recognize the silhouette of a cook flipping burgers with the same wrist snap Tony used to use on downstrokes. Voices drifted through the gap. Lena's first, then Jake's, laughing about a customer who'd complained the milkshake was too spicy. Tell him to grow a pair, Jake said. This is Ozzy's Bite, not a daycare. The cook with the wrist-snap name tag read, "Marco didn't laugh. Some people like flavor, not just heat," he said, voice calm, the accent carrying a trace of New Orleans. Lena's reply was lost under the sizzle of meat hitting the flat top, but the tone was sharp dismissive. John stepped back, heart thudding in a way it hadn't since the last time he'd walked on stage sober. He circled to the front, again slipped into the driver's seat and started the van. The dashboard clock read 11:47. He pulled out of the lot without looking back, the neon sign shrinking in the rear view until it was just a bite mark in the dark. 10 miles down the highway, he pulled into a rest stop, killed the lights, and opened the glove box, where a legal pad waited alongside a half-empty bottle of water and a pack of gum. He wrote in block letters across the top, "Ozzy's Bite. Field Notes. Night 1. Then he listed everything: the sticky door handle, the cardboard cutout defaced with Sharpie, the family arguing over onion rings, the trucker's $5 tip, Lena's gum pop, Jake's paradiddle, Marco's wrist snap, the milkshake complaint, the open employee door, the smell of cayenne that still clung to his hoodie. When he finished, the page was full, the pen nearly dry. He tore it out, folded it into a square, and tucked it into the visor. Then he started the van again and pointed it toward the city lights, the opening chords of Paranoid playing in his head like a warning track. This wasn't just a diner. It was a stage, and the set list had gone to hell. Tomorrow, he'd tune the guitars, reset the amps, and make sure every solo hit the right note. Because John Michael Osbourne, the man who'd survived bat heads, dove heads, and more comebacks than anyone could count, wasn't about to let his own song fade out on a sour chord. John Michael Osbourne rolled the van into the alley behind the second Ozzy's Bite location just after dawn. The sky still bruised with night, the only light coming from the red exit sign above the kitchen door, and the faint glow of a cigarette tip moving in slow arcs near the dumpster. He cut the engine and sat in silence, watching the cherry flare each time the smoker inhaled. The alley smelled of old grease and citrus cleaner, the same combination that had clung to the backstage corridors of every venue he'd ever played. He'd driven through the night, trading the desert for the sprawl of strip malls and palm trees that marked this stretch of the San Fernando Valley, the legal pad now filled with 3 more pages of observations from a drive-thru in Barstow, where the intercom had crackled like a busted vocal mic, and a midnight stop in Bakersfield, where the milkshake machine had been down for maintenance since the Clinton administration. The cigarette tip dropped was crushed under a boot, and the smoker wearing a black apron with the Ozzy's Bite logo stitched in red disappeared inside. John waited another 5 minutes, then slipped out of the van, hoodie swapped for a plain gray work shirt he'd bought at a truck stop, name tag reading Mick clipped crookedly to the pocket. He'd left the aviators in the glove box. The cap was pulled low enough that only the scar on his thumb might give him away, if anyone looked close enough. The side door was unlocked, the milk crate still propping it open, and he stepped into the kitchen's pre-shift hush. The stainless steel gleamed under banks of fluorescent lights. The grill already heating the faint tick-tick-tick of expanding metal like a metronome counting down to service. A lone figure stood at the prep station, back to the door, slicing onions with a knife that flashed in steady arcs. The rhythm was perfect, down across pivot, down each cut, clean enough to make a sushi chef jealous. John recognized the posture before the face, Riff Randy, the man who'd fed the entire Black Sabbath crew during the 1983 tour, when the catering company quit after Ozzy set a hotel curtain on fire with a road flare. Randy had been 25 then, all elbows and ambition. Now the elbows were thicker, the ambition tempered into something quieter, but the knife work hadn't slowed. John cleared his throat. "Morning. Looking for the manager name's Mick starting dish today." Randy didn't turn, just slid the onions into a hotel pan and wiped his hands on a towel slung over his shoulder. "Manager's not in till 8. You're early. Grab an apron, start on the breakfast rush pots. Sinks back left." The voice was gravel and honey, the same one that used to call out, "2 more burgers, no onion," hold the attitude to a line cook in Detroit. John nodded, moved to the sink, and began scrubbing the mountain of sheet trays that had accumulated overnight. The water was scalding the soap industrial strength, and the rhythm of scrape-rinse stack settled into his bones like a bass line. Randy worked beside him in silence for 10 minutes, then spoke without looking up. "You wash like a man who's done time in a tour bus galley." John kept his eyes on the steel. "Something like that." Randy grunted approval or suspicion, hard to tell. By 7, the kitchen filled line cooks in black chef coats, servers tying aprons, a dishwasher named Tia, who moved like she was dancing to a song only she could hear. John kept his head down, listening. Tia greeted every pot he handed her with a "thank you, Mick," genuine enough to make him flinch. A server named Diego complained about the new schedule corporate had cut closing shifts to save labor, leaving the dinner rush understaffed. A prep cook named Sophia muttered that the spice blend had been watered down to cut costs, the cayenne replaced with paprika. And regret. John filed every word away, the legal pad burning a hole in his back pocket. At 7:45, the manager arrived, a man named Trent, whose tie was too tight and whose smile didn't reach his eyes. He clapped once sharp as a snare hit. "Let's move, people. Corporate's watching the numbers. No free refills on soda after 2. No extra sauce packets. Smile like you mean it." Tia's dance slowed. Sophia's knife paused mid-chop. John scrubbed harder the steel, reflecting a face he barely recognized. Shift change brought the breakfast crowd construction workers in dusty boots, a mom with a toddler who kept trying to climb the cardboard Ozzy, cut out an old man in a Vietnam vet cap who ordered black coffee and the senior special with the patience of someone who'd waited in worse lines. John watched from the dish pit as Tia took the vet's order, wrote extra crispy hash on the ticket without being asked, and slipped him a second coffee when Trent wasn't looking. Randy plated the food with the same precision he'd used on onions, sliding the plate across the pass with a nod that said, "Eat slow, it's hot." John felt something loosen in his chest, the first clean note in a song that had gone flat. Then Lena and Jake arrived for the lunch swing. Same smirks, same gum pop, same phone glow under the counter. John's hands stilled in the soapy water. Trent greeted them with fist bumps and a whispered, "Keep the line moving, comps are down, 12%. Lena rolled her eyes. "Tell corporate to send better help. Second solo kids can't count change." Jake laughed already, scrolling. John dried his hands, slipped out the side door, and circled to the front lot where the van waited. He opened the glove box, pulled out a small digital recorder, and clipped it to the inside of his apron. Back inside, he resumed washing, the tiny red light blinking like a heartbeat. Lunch rush hit like a double-kick drum. Orders flew, tickets spit from the printer in a continuous scroll, the grill sizzled nonstop. John moved between sink and prep ears, tuned to every conversation. Tia told a table of high school kids about the time she saw Black Sabbath in '99, her voice bright enough to cut through the noise. Sophia showed a new hire how to season the fries, so the cayenne stuck without clumping. Randy barked. Behind every time he passed with a tray of burgers, the word "a reflex," older than most of the staff. Between rushes, John caught fragments, Trent on the phone in the walk-in voice, low, "Yeah, I'll move the numbers, just keep the bonus coming." Lena to Jake. "If Marco screws up one more order, I'm writing him up. Second solo doesn't mean special treatment." Jake. "Let him crash. Less paperwork. John's recorder caught it all, the red light steady. At 2:30, the rush thinned, the kitchen settling into the lull before dinner prep. Randy found him at the sink, arms elbow-deep in bacon grease. "You're not just a dishwasher, Mick." John met his eyes, saw the recognition flicker. "No," he said quietly. "I'm not." Randy nodded once, slow. "Then you'll want to see the walk-in inventory logs. Trent's been shorting the spice order for months. Says it's cost optimization." He jerked his head toward the office. "Doors unlocked after 4. John worked the rest of the shift in silence, the recorder filling the legal pad in his pocket, growing heavier with every note. At 3:55, he clocked out apron folded neatly on the hook labeled dish. In the parking lot, he opened the van, transferred the recorder to a padded case, and added a new page to the pad. Trent skimming spice budget, Lena/Jake, targeting Marco Randy, knows more than he says. Tia is heart of the operation. He started the engine, the van rumbling to life like an old Marshall stack warming up. The sun was high now, the asphalt shimmering, the diner's neon sign dark until dusk. He pulled onto the boulevard, merged into traffic, and pointed the van toward the next location on his list, a flagship store in downtown LA where the walls were lined with gold records, and the milkshake machine was supposed to be legendary. The recorder sat on the passenger seat, red light finally off the weight of the day, settling into his bones like feedback after the final chord. He reached for the stereo, thumbed through the presets until he found a classic rock station playing War Pigs. The opening riff filled the cab, and he let it play, loud windows down the wind, whipping the cap from his head and sending it tumbling into the back seat. Tomorrow, he'd be Mick again, or maybe someone else. Tonight, he was just John Michael Osbourne driving through the city he'd once set on fire with a single note, carrying a pocket full of evidence and a heart full of resolve. The song built to its climax, guitars screaming, and he sang along under his breath, voice rough but true. Time will tell on their power minds. The diner chain was a stage, and the curtain was about to rise. John Michael Osbourne stood in the cavernous belly of an abandoned factory on the edge of Birmingham's industrial district, the same brick shell where Black Sabbath had rehearsed in 1970 before the world knew their name. The air smelled of rust and old smoke, the floor scarred with decades of boot prints and spilled beer. He'd rented the place under a shell company flown in overnight, on a red-eye from LAX, and spent the pre-dawn hours with a skeleton crew of roadies turned stagehands rigging lights, sound, and a single spotlight that cut through the dust like a blade. 120 folding chairs faced a makeshift stage, a low platform built from flight cases and plywood draped in black cloth. A lone microphone stand center stage. Behind it, a projection screen the size of a tour backdrop hung from the rafters. Every employee of Ozzy's Bite, cooks, servers, dishwashers, managers, even the night shift cleaners, had been told only that attendance was mandatory. Transportation provided no exceptions. Buses began rolling in at 6:00 a.m., headlights carving tunnels through the fog, doors hissing open to deposit bewildered clusters of black-aproned workers into the cavernous space. John watched from the catwalk above, hoodie swapped for a tailored black suit, no tie sleeves rolled to the elbow, the scar on his thumb catching the faint glow of the exit sign. He'd left the cap and aviators in the van. Tonight, there would be no disguise. At 6:57, the last bus emptied. The crowd milled near the chairs, voices echoing off the high ceiling, some excited, some grumbling about the early hour, a few clutching travel mugs of coffee that steamed in the chill. Trent, the San Fernando manager, stood near the front row in his too-tight tie, checking his watch every 30 seconds. Lena and Jake hovered together near the aisle phones, out thumbs scrolling. Tia bounced on the balls of her feet, eyes wide, whispering to Sophia about rumors of a surprise concert. Randy leaned against a pillar, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Marco stood apart, hands in his pockets, shoulders squared like a man waiting for a verdict. John gave a single nod to the sound booth. The house lights dimmed to black. A low rumble rolled through the PA sub-bass so deep it vibrated in the sternum. Then the opening riff of Symptom of the Universe exploded, guitars, snarling, drums thundering. Strobe lights sliced the darkness in perfect sync, and the screen ignited with footage, the first Ozzy's Bite ribbon-cutting John in a chef's coat, flipping a burger for the cameras. A montage of second solo graduates shaking hands on their first day. Randy plating a perfect Sabbath burger in slow motion. Tia high-fiving a table of construction workers. The music cut abruptly to silence. The spotlight snapped on pinning John center stage. He stepped forward, boots echoing on plywood, and gripped the mic stand with both hands. "I am the Prince of fucking Darkness," he said, voice raw, Brummy accent thick as the fog outside. "And your boss." The room froze. A collective inhale sucked the air from the rafters. Phones lowered. Trent's watch slipped from his fingers and clattered to the concrete. John let the silence stretch, eyes sweeping the crowd, locking on every face. "Some of you know me from posters, some from cups, some from a signature on a paycheck you cash and forget. Tonight, you meet the man who started this with a tax attorney's bad idea and a promise to give people a stage who'd been told the show was over." He clicked a remote. The screen shifted to security footage. Lena, rolling her eyes at a customer, Jake pocketing a tip meant for the jar, Trent in the walk-in on his phone. "Yeah, I'll move the numbers, just keep the bonus coming." Gasps rippled. John clicked again. Audio waveforms, his own recorder from the dish pit. Lena's second solo, "Kids Can't Count Change." Jake, "Let him crash. Less paperwork." Marco's name flashed in red. John's voice dropped to a growl. "That's not a diner. That's a bloody rehearsal for failure." He paced the stage boots, deliberate. "I built Ozzy's Bite to be a second solo, loud, proud, a place where the kid fresh out of prison flips a better burger than the trust fund chef next door, where the single mom with 3 jobs gets a shift that doesn't break her, where the music isn't just on the speakers, it's in the way you treat people." He stopped center stage, spotlight harsh. "But I got lazy. Signed checks from a tour bus in Sweden while the stage rotted. That ends tonight." Another click. A new slide, 4 names in bold, Trent. 2 regional managers, 1 corporate accountant. "You're done. Security will escort you to collect personal items. Severance is 3 months plus a reference that says you can count money, but not hearts. Don't come back." 4 men in black polos appeared from the wings, guiding the named managers out. Trent's face went the color of overcooked bacon. Lena started to speak. John raised a hand. "You two, Lena, Jake, same deal. 3 months, clean reference doors that way. Or you stay and prove this matters more than your ego. Clock starts now." He turned to the screen, clicked once more. A single word, second solo 2.0. Bullet points appeared. Every graduate guaranteed interview for management track. Top performer per region promoted within 6 months. Marco Los Angeles flagship effective immediately. Marco's jaw dropped. Tia let out a whoop that echoed off the rafters. John stepped off the platform mic cord, trailing like a guitar lead, and walked straight to Marco. He extended a hand. "You cook like the riff is your life. Run that store like it's your stage. Keys are in the envelope." Marco took the handshake grip, firm eyes shining. John moved through the crowd, stopping at Tia. "You're the heartbeat. Assistant GM, same store. Teach them how to dance." Tia hugged him before she could stop herself, then pulled back, cheeks flushed. He reached Randy last, clapped him on the shoulder. "You've been holding the fort since '83. Corporate chef all locations. Menus yours to rewrite. Just keep the cayenne honest." Randy's grin was slow, wolfish. "About damn time." John returned to the stage, grabbed an acoustic guitar from the wings, his old Gibson, the one he'd written, "Mama, I'm coming home" on, and sat on a stool under the spotlight. The room hushed. He strummed the opening chords of Change's voice, softer than anyone expected, every note carrying the weight of every mile he'd driven incognito. Employees swayed. Some cried. When the final chord faded, he set the guitar down. "This diner rocks, because you do. Not because of my name on the sign. Because of the way Tia refills Yvette's coffee. The way Sophia seasons fries like it's a love letter. The way Marco flips a burger like it's the last solo of the night. Starting tomorrow, I'm in the trenches. Random stores, random shifts. You'll see me with a spatula or a mop. And you'll see me listening." He pointed to the exits. "Buses leave in 20. Envelopes on your chairs. New contracts, raises tied to customer scores, not corporate bonuses. Sign if you're in. Tear it up if you're out. No hard feelings either way." The lights came up slow. Employees opened envelopes, whispers turning to murmurs, then to cheers. Lena and Jake stood frozen. After a long beat, Lena tore her contract in half and walked out. Jake followed. Trent was already gone. Marco held his envelope to his chest like a Grammy. Tia was on the phone, voice shaking, telling someone they didn't have to work doubles anymore. Randy lit a cigarette under the no smoking sign and exhaled toward the ceiling like a dragon claiming territory. John slipped out a side door into the fog, the sound of chairs scraping and voices rising behind him like the roar after an encore. He lit his own cigarette first in months and leaned against the brick wall. The factory loomed above him, windows dark, but inside a new song was tuning up. He flicked the butt into the gravel, ground it out with his boot, and walked toward the van. The spotlight was off, but the show was just beginning. John Michael Osbourne stepped out of the Los Angeles flagship Ozzy's Bite at 4:17 a.m. The sky still ink black, the neon bite mark above the door flickering its last magenta pulse before the timer shut it down for daylight. The sidewalk glistened from the overnight street cleaner, and the air carried the faint metallic tang of the Pacific drifting inland. He wore a black chef coat with Marco stitched on the chest, borrowed from the new manager, and carried a stainless steel clipboard heavy with laminated checklists. 6 months had passed since the Birmingham factory showdown, and the chain now hummed at a frequency he could feel in his bones, the same low thrum that used to run through a stadium floor when the lights dropped and the first chord hit. Tonight, he had worked the grill himself, flipping Sabbath burgers beside Marco until the dinner rush thinned, then moved to the dish pit with Tia until the final tray sparkled. The last customer, a tattooed nurse finishing a 12-hour shift, had left with a takeout bag and a story about the night Ozzy Osbourne personally refilled her cola and asked about her kids' science fair. John locked the front door, handed the keys to Marco, and clapped him on the back. "Your stage now. Don't let the encore suck." Marco grinned the same grin that had once been shy in a second solo interview and disappeared inside to count the till. John walked to the curb where a matte black food truck idled, engine purring like a contented cat. Painted across the side in crimson script, Ozzy's Bite Academy, no encore required. He climbed into the passenger seat, nodded to the driver, a former tour bus mechanic named Diesel, and pulled the door shut. The truck rolled south through empty streets past shuttered taquerias and 24-hour laundromats toward a converted warehouse in South Central, where the academy held its first dawn class. Inside, 20 folding tables were set in a U, each with a cutting board, a chef knife, and a stack of recipe cards printed in bold sans serif. The walls were lined with chalkboards scrawled with mantras. Season like you mean it. Plating is storytelling. Second chances, cook hotter. At the front, a small stage held a single induction burner and a guitar amp patched into a wireless mic. John had insisted on the amp said every kitchen needed a back line. Students began filtering in at 4:45, a teenage runaway who'd been sleeping in Echo Park, a veteran with a prosthetic leg and a Purple Heart, a grandmother who'd lost her diner to foreclosure, a former sound engineer who'd fried one too many vocal cords on whiskey and now wanted to fry onions instead. They wore black aprons with the Academy logo, a bite mark shaped like a guitar pick, and took seats without speaking the way roadies take marks before load-in. At 5:00 sharp, the overhead fluorescence dimmed. A single spotlight hit the burner, and John stepped into the light holding a cast-iron skillet like a symbol. "Morning, you beautiful disasters," he said, voice warm, the brummy lilt softened by years of American arenas. "Lesson 1, fire, is your drummer. Respect the tempo." He clicked the burner to medium-high, dropped a pat of butter, and let it sizzle until the foam subsided. Too soon, and it burns. Too late, and it's cold. Same with second chances. He tossed in diced onions, the scent blooming sharp and sweet. Students leaned forward. He narrated every move, knife grip, heat control, the moment to deglaze with cola reduction, until the skillet held a perfect hash, ready for plating. Then he set the pan aside, picked up the wireless mic, and strummed an air guitar chord that blasted through the amp. "Your turn. Pair up. One cooks, one tastes. Critique like you're reviewing a live album, honest, loud, useful." The room erupted into motion knives, flashing burners, clicking laughter, rising like feedback. John circulated tasting, adjusting, demonstrating wrist flicks with the same precision he once used to nail the outro to Crazy Train. By 7:30, every student had plated a breakfast burger, and the chalkboards were covered with new mantras. In fresh chalk, listen to the sizzle. Flavor is forgiveness. At 8:00, the garage doors rolled up, revealing the food truck now transformed into a mobile diner. Students loaded trays, piled into the cab, and rolled out to Skid Row, where steam tables were already set under a pop-up tent. Diesel parked beside a mural of a dove carrying an olive branch made of guitar strings. Within minutes, a line formed: homeless veterans, families in transition, night shift janitors clocking out. Academy students served with military efficiency, calling orders like a tight rhythm section. 2 Sabbath scrambles, extra hash. 1 Madman shake. No cayenne. For the kid. John worked the window, handing out trays, signing the backs of paper menus with a Sharpie that never left his pocket. A man with a cardboard sign that read "Hungry Vet" accepted a burger, looked up and froze. "Holy hell, your John," cut him off with a grin. "Just the cook today, mate. Eat slow. It's hot." The man laughed a sound like a snare crack and moved down the line. By 10:00, the truck was empty, the tent folded, and the students piled back inside, faces flushed with something brighter than sunrise. John stood on the curb watching the truck pull away and felt the same rush he used to get when the final encore lights came up and 50,000 voices sang the riff back to him. Back at the flagship, Marco had implemented a new tradition. Every shift started with a 15-minute sound check in the walk-in cooler team. Huddle temperature check, one personal win from the previous day, shared aloud. Today's win belonged to Sophia. She'd taught a new hire how to fold foil swan wrappers, and the kid had cried because no one had ever trusted him with origami before. John slipped in unnoticed, leaned against the stainless shelves, and listened as the circle moved clockwise, each voice adding a harmony. When it reached him, he said simply, "Heard a vet laugh this morning." "That's my win." The cooler door swung shut behind him as he left the echo lingering like reverb. Afternoon brought the first metal feast, a quarterly block party event where every Ozzy's Bite location shut for 2 hours, rolled food trucks into underserved neighborhoods, and fed anyone who showed. Today's feast was in Watts, the lot, behind a community center transformed into a mini-festival, local bands on a flatbed stage, face-painting stations manned by off-duty servers, a bounce house shaped like a giant bat. Randy emceed from the grill of the lead truck spatula in one hand, wireless mic in the other, calling out orders like set lists. Table 6 bark at the moon. Fries, extra crunch. Tia ran the milkshake station, blending cayenne chocolate concoctions so fast the machine screamed like a guitar solo. John wandered the crowd in a plain black t-shirt, no logo, signing napkins, posing for selfies, tasting every dish to ensure the cayenne still bit. A little girl in a wheelchair handed him a drawing, the Ozzy's Bite logo, with a heart where the bite mark should be. He knelt, signed the corner. "To my favorite artist, keep rocking," and tucked it into his pocket beside the Sharpie. By dusk, the sun bled orange across the sky, the bands winding down the last trays emptied. John climbed onto the flatbed stage, took the mic from Randy, and waited for quiet. The crowd easily 2,000 hushed. "This," he said, gesturing to the trucks, "the faces, the empty plates, is the real encore. Not the gold records, not the stadiums. You lot cooking, serving, showing up when the world said your solo was over. That's the music." He raised a fist. "Play it loud." The crowd roared a single wave of sound that rolled across the lot and bounced off the surrounding buildings. Lights on the food trucks flashed in sequence, red, white, blue, like a light show synced to a heartbeat. Later in the quiet of the flagship, after closing, John sat alone in a booth with a cup of black coffee and the little girl's drawing propped against the ketchup bottle. Marco dropped into the opposite seat, apron folded neatly, exhaustion and pride fighting for space on his face. "Numbers came in," he said, sliding a tablet across the table. "Revenue up 42% chain-wide. Customer satisfaction 4.9. Staff retention 91% highest in the industry." John scrolled, nodded, then pushed the tablet back. "Numbers are feedback. The real metric is how many second solos we launch." Marco smiled. 23 graduates placed in management tracks. Another 40 in the academy pipeline. And the food truck program just got a grant from the city. John tapped the drawing. "That's the grant I care about." He stood, stretched, and walked to the front window where the neon bite mark glowed steady. Now, no flicker, no stutter. Outside, the city moved in its endless rhythm, headlights streaking palms, swaying distant sirens, harmonizing with the low hum of the cooler compressors. John pressed his palm to the glass, feeling the vibration of the sign through the pane. Leadership, he understood now, was not a crown or a contract. It was a daily riff you played until your fingers bled, then played again. Cleaner, louder, truer. It was showing up with a spatula when the crowd expected a microphone. It was amplifying the quiet kid who seasoned fries like a love letter. It was turning second chances into encores that shook the foundations of every diner, every kitchen, every heart that walked through the door. He turned the open sign to closed, killed the neon, and stepped into the night. The food truck idled at the curb, diesel at the Wheel Academy logo glowing soft crimson. Tomorrow, another city, another dawn class, another line of hungry souls waiting for a hot meal and a hotter shot at redemption. John climbed aboard, pulled the door shut, and spoke into the CB mic mounted on the dash. "Let's roll." The fire's still drumming. The truck pulled away, tires humming the opening bars of a song only they could hear, carrying the Prince of Darkness and his traveling academy into the dark, where every mile was a measure, every stop a downbeat, and every plate served a promise that the music, the real music, never had to end.